All that matters is...
Wrong!
This town deserves a better class.
Heavy Metal Podcast.
I'm gonna give it...
If you do not listen, then the hell with you.
Walk through the gate of consciousness. Stop flows drop from under you.
Mr. Chief Justice, beautiful mother punchers, and bastards of reality, our long national nightmare is on part 2! Welcome to And Volume for All, a deeply reverent and lovingly irreverent exploration of the history, philosophy, and future, it's back, of the greatest music in the world, heavy metal. Let's get weird! When we last left our heroes, we left them in the city of Annals. Oh, I'm sorry, I mispronounced that. No, I didn't. In 1972, the tour to support Volume 4 collapsed on September 15th at the Hollywood Bowl when guitarist Tony Iommi collapsed on September 15th at the Hollywood Bowl. The official medical reason was exhaustion, but I think we all know he was suffering from a broken heart. Nah, it was coke. It was like 4 days of coke, non-stop coke. So, the tour took a little break for station identification and for the album to be certified gold, and then they went back out in January, finishing up the tour in March at the Newcastle City Hall, where my parents got married, in the sleepy little village of Newcastle upon Tyne, the birthplace of the evilest band in evilldom, Venom. If you want to know more about Venom, you can listen to episode 2 of And Volume for All, entitled Nuwabum and Friends. Black Sabbath reunited in the summer of '73 at the DuPont Mansion in Bel Air, but when they pulled up to the house about 7 or 8 and they yelled to the cabbie, "Yo home, smell you later," they looked at their kingdom and they were finally there to sit on their thrones, and then they said nope and went back to England. Something about LA just didn't get their mojo rising this time, but rather than holing up in the home of future murderers, they decided to hole up in the home of former alive people. Specifically, multiple generations of the Wyndham family. Sabbath rented Clearwell Castle, a Victorian Gothic family home located in Gloucestershire, or as we would say in the United States, Gloucestershire. I don't care if my sister's shire or not, I'm the only one do the kissing around these parts. Yuck! Clearwell Castle was built in 1727 by the family patriarch Thomas Wyndham, who died there in 1752. But the castle was inherited by his son Charles, who also died there in 1801. But his son, Thomas, who died there 13 years later, had 2 daughters, and only one of them died there. The other, Carolyn, married a man whose first name was Wyndham because the English couldn't be bothered to invent more than 3 or 4 different names, and he went on to die there in 1850. Carolyn, however, lived in that castle until 1870, when she also died there. Which brings us to the story Tony Iommi told the Birmingham Mail about the recording of Sabbath's 5th album, in which the band had an unnerving encounter with the unexplained. Unless you've heard of ghosts before, then it's explained. It's an unnerving encounter with the explained. Iommi said, "We were setting up the gear in the dungeons." Okay, let me just stop you there, Tony. It's a house with a dungeon. Is that right? Yeah. Carry on. And we were the only people there. Except the ghost, of course. And we were walking down the hallway, and we saw a cloaked figure coming toward us. It walked into a room, and we followed it. Which is just what you do when you see someone who you don't know wearing a cloak in a dungeon. You go where they're going. We followed it to see who it was. It was a ghost, and there was nobody there. Except, again, and I can't stress this enough, the ghost. And then he wrote this. is Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, the title track off of the album, which I think is Black Sabbath at the peak of their powers. Now, I have to point out that there is an authorship question on this one. A Brazilian artist named Vanusa released a song titled What to Do in 1973, about 4 months before Sabbath Bloody Sabbath was released, and a month before Sabbath supposedly began working on material. So it's very possible that, one, Iommi, as a famously avid consumer of Brazilian radio, heard the song and took the riff for his own. Two, Iommi heard the riff, forgot about it, woke up with the tune in his head, and subconsciously ripped it off. Or three, Iommi came up with his own riff at roughly the same time, wholly independent of Vanusa, like Newton and Leibniz, both independently discovering calculus in the late 1600s. That seems least likely. Not to mention, such an event would naturally imply that the human mind is potentially capable of exchanging information across vast distances of space and time without any previously understood or measurable form of communication, which, in and of itself, would revolutionize our understanding of knowledge and consciousness, shattering the empirical limitations of the scientific method and freeing humanity from the shackles of tribalism and solipsistic models of identity by positing the theory that everyone and everything in the universe is fundamentally indistinct from every other thing, that we are all connected by an undifferentiated energy continuum, merely vibrating at temporarily independent frequencies, producing the illusion of separateness, while the essential nature of reality is that of an ineffable and eternal oneness. Nah, fuck that hippie shit. Go see Hawks! Anyway, here's What to Do by Vanusa. I'd be hard-pressed to argue that Iommi came up with that on his own, but unlike serial music thief Jimmy Page, there aren't a bunch of other examples to point to. Also, Vanusa never sued and apparently has said that, being Brazilian, she didn't mind if Sabbath trimmed a little off the top. Because she's Brazilian. You see, it's a joke about a Brazilian. In the late 1960s and early 70s, Black Sabbath had created not only heavy metal itself, but its first subgenre, doom metal. Having passed through the pon farr of musical experimentation and existential doubt on their previous record, Sabbath was now expanding their sound with confidence and cohesion, and once again willing a new form of metal into existence. Volume 4 is the bridge between doom metal and progressive metal, and while it took Black Sabbath 3 albums to perfect the former, I believe they perfected the latter in one. Tony Iommi gets a lot of credit for what Sabbath was able to do on Sabbath Bloody Sabbath and Sabotage, and he deserves it. But when I say that Sabbath was at the pinnacle of their career here, I say it across the board. I know, I did a lengthy, overwrought defense of Ozzy on part 1 of this episode, so I don't need to do another one here. But I'm going to anyway. You see, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward are all innovators of the form. They don't really need any defending. Ozzy is less of an innovator and more of an oddity, and he's the frontman. So he takes a lot of shit for being overrated or under-talented, and it doesn't help that he went on to have a solo career that, in a lot of ways, eclipsed what he was able to do with Sabbath, at least commercially. Ozzy's often treated like the Forrest Gump of heavy metal, a guy who was in the right place at the right time to ride the wave of the 3 other geniuses in the band. Sound like anybody we know, Beatles fans? I know, it's not a one-to-one comparison because that particular Beatle only went on to have a mildly successful solo career after their breakup, but we're all very proud of Paul regardless. Iommi even discredits Ozzy's contributions when comparing him to latter Sabbath frontman like Ronnie James Dio and others. But Tony's claims about how Ozzy never sang across the melody, and then Dio came in and he invented music. It's not true. It's not just empirically untrue, it ignores the depth and complexity that Ozzy was able to bring to these albums consistently and convincingly. Also, it's just weird to repeatedly say something untrue that we all have on tape. It's like if Iommi claimed repeatedly for years, Ozzy only performs in concert while wearing an oversized moose costume. Well, he doesn't, okay? We have hours and hours of concert footage in which you can see Ozzy Osbourne performing, not dressed like an anthropomorphic moose. Peter Gabriel, maybe, but not Ozzy. Listen to the vocal melody on the second track from Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, and pay particular attention to the back half. On the lyrics, I've lived 1,000 times, I've found out what it means to be believed. Ozzy is weaving this intricate emotional tapestry by double tracking and harmonizing his own vocals on what is my favorite song on the album, A National Acrobat. You're talking to me? I was just talking about you. Thanks for listening, Ozzy. Sorry about the Forrest Gump joke. There's a story that is often used to support the specious depiction of Ozzy as some kind of musical idiot savant during the recording of Sabotage. The album. It's the album. Hi-ya, bum. That's my Lou Costello impression, because all of my humor is older than everyone who's dead. There's a story that's often used to support the specious depiction of Ozzy as some kind of musical idiot savant during the recording of Sabotage, the album immediately following Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. I'm getting a bit ahead of myself on the timeline here, but I hope that it won't result in my being turned to steel and exacting my revenge by killing the people that I once saved, but these are the risks we podcasters all take. Happened to Clay. Skinner Reconsidered. You don't hear that podcast anymore, do you? Turned to steel. Killed the people. The band brought in the English Chamber Choir to provide vocals on a song called Super Czar when Ozzy walked into Morgan's studio. He saw all these professional singers warming up with their sheet music in hand and immediately turned around and left because he thought he was in the wrong place. I mean, that's fucking funny and about the most Ozzy thing that Ozzy could have done. But it does kind of paint a picture of Ozzy as the dolt who, don't understand the historical underpinnings of his own genre, like the three other classy sophisticates in Black Sabbath. But there's another story about the album I'm currently supposed to be covering that paints an entirely different picture of his contribution to the band. Here's the closer from Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. The track is called A Spiral Architect. Listen to what the strings are doing, and I'll tell you why on the other side. Hill from the other side. That's a little karaoke moment from Adele's third album. I'm not kidding. I'm really killing people. By the way, this is Adele. That whole string section that you just heard was composed and conducted by Ozzy Osbourne. He couldn't write out the score or play a single note of it, but he was the one telling the orchestra where to come in, when to build, where to go out, and what the whole thing should sound like. That was Ozzy Osbourne. And it's easy to listen to him talk now and think of him as the shock rocker caveman who decapitated a bat with his incisors or snorted a line of ants to win a cocaine contest with Motley Crue. And now, I just can't figure out how the TV machine works. Sharon. But what gets lost in all of that is what a real musical talent he is, and what a truly exceptional career the man has managed to have in music. Black Sabbath came out of Butthole upon Nowhere, England, to become one of the biggest bands in the world, and when it all fell apart a decade later, Ozzy had nothing. When he finally put together a new band, his management wanted to call it Son of Sabbath, because Ozzy Osbourne didn't mean shit. 1 year later, he put out an album that would go platinum 5 times and outsell every record in the Sabbath canon except Paranoid. In fact, Blizzard of Oz, No More Tears, Diary of a Madman, and Bark at the Moon would all sell more records than Sabbath's second highest selling album, Master of Reality, by millions of copies. Bark at the Moon. It's a terrible album. I'm sorry, guys. It's just not good. Thank you, Ozzy. So it's easy to think of Ozzy as a kind of heavy metal mascot with a lot of luck and good management, but I think there is something else that explains his unprecedented success. And I'm going to cannibalize my own Twitter account here to make my point. I used to be an artistic director of a theater in Arizona, and People would audition that didn't have a lot of experience or skill, but they would walk on stage and everyone would want to watch them. It was like having a living fire just step out from behind a curtain and start talking. I called these people unicorns because if a unicorn comes to an audition and wants to be in your shitty production of Coriolanus, you put that fucking unicorn on stage and people will come watch it because you got a unicorn to come and play Coriolanus. Emphasis on the anus. Ozzy Osbourne is a unicorn. He opens up his face to sing and magic falls out. And I know it drives people crazy because his achievements defy analysis. And I fucking love analysis. Last episode, I converted the annual median income for residents of Birmingham, England in the 1960s from pounds to dollars, and that required me to do math. So it's fun to think of Ozzy as the Ringo of Black Sabbath, but he's just not. Ringo isn't even the Ringo of the Beatles, but that's a story for a different podcast. Meanwhile, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath goes to 11 on the US Billboard charts and number 4 in the UK, eventually becoming the band's 5th consecutive platinum album, about which Rolling Stone's Gordon Fletcher said the following. This record transcends third-generation rock in that it possesses a degree of internal intricacy, in that it possesses a degree of internal intricacy. I had internal intricacy twice. That's how I got my kids. This record transcends third-generation rock in that it possesses a degree of internal intricacy that belies popular conceptions of heavy metal. The use of tempo changes and electronic keyboards to cast liquid emotions makes Sabbath Bloody Sabbath an extraordinarily gripping affair. The blues ought to make you want to cry one minute and make you want to get up and dance the next. That's what Black Sabbath have always done for this believer, and in doing it again, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath is nothing less than a complete success. And that's why Rolling Stone is the greatest music magazine in the history of history, and I challenge you to find any instance in which I've said otherwise. Another YouTube recommendation here. On April 6, 1974, Sabbath plays an enormous music festival called Cal Jam in Ontario, California. That's what the Cal stands for. I think the Jam stands for Jamiroquai, but don't quote me on that. I don't know what their policy was on baby performers. But if you watch this one back-to-back with the Paris concert that I talked about in the last episode supporting the debut, the transformation Sabbath goes through in a little under 5 years is astonishing. Cal Jam was headlined by Emerson, Lake, and Palmer and featured Sabbath's sister band, Deep Purple. For what was once a gloomy blues quartet from Birmingham, England, Cal Jam must have felt like reaching the mountaintop. Sabbath Bloody Sabbath had gone gold in March, and less than a month later, they're supporting it at a festival attended by somewhere around 250,000 people, with parts of their set broadcast on national American television. If you don't know it's a festival, it's a bit odd to see Sabbath playing War Pigs, Snowblind, Paranoid, and Children of the Grave beneath a giant fucking rainbow set, but it doesn't seem to bother them much. I bet baby Jamiroquai liked it. The tour ended in Sydney, Australia, with AC/DC opening for 4 of those shows. I don't know which album AC/DC was supporting, but I think it was the one about electricity, or having sex with electricity. Anyway, it was that one. You know the one. In February of 1975, Sabbath goes back to Morgan Studios to start recording again, and what's stunning to me is the pace of these albums. They write 6 of the greatest records in rock history in 5 years. Transforming, codifying, and inventing new genres with each release, and the follow-up to Sabbath Bloody Sabbath is no exception. The third track off of the album, Sabotage, is considered by many to be one of the first iterations of a heavy metal subgenre that, in about a decade's time, would absolutely conquer the world. There is a fairly decent case to be made that on their 6th studio record, Tony Iommi and Black Sabbath can be credibly credited with the invention of thrash. that is Symptom of the Universe, what has to be one of the most innovative and just gonzo tracks in the entire Sabbath canon. For this album, the band skipped Clearwell Castle and went straight to Morgan's studio. Presumably they wanted to avoid accusations that their albums were being ghost-written. I say they didn't want any accusations that their records were being ghost-written. By a ghost. Okay, Ozzy, I'm moving on. The source of inspiration on this one was not the immortal souls of the dead, but rather living mortals with no souls at all. Lawyers! And their former manager, Patrick Meehan. Turns out Meehan had been robbing the band blind.
Snow, that is.
And the album title was a reaction to that fact. As Ozzy put it, he doesn't know this guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. He's going, Jack, they should be licking your ass. They give you a thing. Patrick Meehan never gave you a straight answer when you asked him how much dough you were making. Also, he never helped me with a fucking remote. Or as Geezer put it, we were being ripped off. We had to pay him to get out of our contract. It cost us thousands of dollars of lawyers' bills. And then we got a huge tax bill. The Inland Revenue didn't sympathize with us. Most of our money went to lawyers and taxes. Well, that's what money's for, Geezer. It's not surprising that the album begins with the hum of the band's amplifiers, a stray note from Iommi, and the sound of someone in the studio shouting, "Attack," before Bill Ward counts them in on the album opener, Hole in the Sky. That someone was the album co-producer Mike Butcher, which is just a great name for a producer, and I believe is also the name of Ozzy and Sharon's plastic surgeon. Butcher explained the impromptu command. Sabbath had a supporting act who had a manager who would stand behind them on stage shouting, "Attack! Attack!" So that's what I shouted from the control room. What Butcher doesn't say is that supporting act was Seals and Croft. I mean, you can't just launch right into a song like Diamond Girl. You gotta get a little angry. But Attack is exactly what Sabbath did. Here's Iommi on the album's uniquely aggressive tone. My guitar sound was harder. I was brought on by all the aggravation we felt over the business with management and lawyers. Bill Ward said it was probably the only album ever recorded with lawyers in the studio. Well, up to that point anyway. That's how Metallica records every album now. But the most direct assault on the parasitic nature of the music industry came in the form of the album closer, an ode to their former manager, Patrick Meehan, as penned by none other than Ozzy Osbourne himself, who said, "Oh, the anger I felt toward Meehan came pouring out." Mike Butcher admitted responsibility for the song's title when he said, "Some guy walked in and said, 'Black Sabbath?' And Tony said, 'Yeah.' The guy said, 'I have something for you,' and gave him a writ. Writ is just the English way of making soul-crushing legal documents sound silly and fun. The writ begins with the outro from the previous track called Am I Going Insane? Radio. It wasn't a radio single. Radio was just more British slang for nutter. Wait, no, that's an English term too. Bonkers. Mad. Oh shit. Now I've got an accent. I was chuffed to tell you about radio. Now I feel like throwing a wobbly. Sod it. This is pants. I feel like a total muppet. Crazy. Means crazy. Which is the way Geezer described an Australian friend he invited into Morgan Studios to provide the laughter on the intro. Butcher mixed that laughter with the sound of a baby crying that he found on an unmarked cassette in the studio. The producer then slowed the tape of the nameless baby, possibly Jamiroquai, we just don't know, to half and mixed it with the laughter of Geezer's insane Australian chum, resulting in a transition that could only be compared to the sound that must have regularly echoed from Jimmy Savile's basement. I'm telling you all this because I want to play a longer section of this song than I typically play because the writ is better than other songs, and it holds something of a special place in heavy metal history. So without further ado, here is the final track on what is considered by many to be the last truly great album by the original 4 members of Black Sabbath. This is The Writ.
everything unknown. A man full picture of a stolen soul, the fornication of the golden throne. A smiling face, it means the world to me, yeah. So tired of sadness and of misery. My life is started some time ago. Where it ends, I don't know. I thought I was so good. I thought I was far. I feel my world is torn apart. But everything is gonna work out fine, yeah. If it don't, I think I'll lose my mind.
God damn. You know, I get that there's a lot of people with a lot of different tastes out there, but I don't know how you hear that and not think that that is incredible fucking music. Sabotage is released in July, and despite Billy Altman of Rolling Stone declaring Sabotage is not only Black Sabbath's best record since Paranoid, it might be their best ever. It is the only album of the first 6 that fails to go platinum because, as Holden Caulfield reminds us, people always clap for the wrong things. Sabbath goes on tour from July of 1975 to January of 1976, supported by, among others, Kiss. And that should tell you we're coming to the end. No matter what the social situation is, the moment you hear a song from Kiss, it's time to leave. That party or wedding or funeral is over. Time to go home and listen to something else. Like your conscience. I'm going to take a little break here, and when we come back, we will talk about the penultimate and the ultimate Black Sabbath albums with the original lineup. So buckle up here, everybody. Lots of controversial content coming, some absolute bangers that never get enough love, and one epic masterpiece about a man who rises from nothing to become one of the greatest visionaries in the history of the musical/medical profession. I'll give you a hint. He didn't go to school for a year to be called Mr. Rock and Roll. When we come back. By the time they came back into the studio for Album 7, the doom and gloom of the 70s had begun to bifurcate into 2 very distinct camps. The fiercely political, anti-cultural genre of punk and the equally fierce denialism of disco. While the former sought to free the music industry from such outmoded shackles of the past as learning to play an instrument, the latter sought to remind the world that although the 70s produced an entire generation with irreversibly diminished mental capacity from decades of lead poisoning and exponential growth in the newly burgeoning serial killer industry, you should be dancing. At this point, Tony Iommi is producing Sabbath exclusively in the studio, while the other three members were similarly occupied producing liver enzymes and melanin at the beach. We were at the beach. Everybody had matching towels. Look, when you have a Fred Snyder impression, you have to find places to use it. Bill, Tony, and Geezer were beginning to suspect Ozzy wanted to leave the band around the time he started making and wearing his own t-shirts that read Blizzard of Oz. Not sure what tipped him off there. And if you needed any further evidence that the wheels were beginning to come off, Sabbath decided to record their 7th album in Florida, where nothing good has ever happened. Though they were in a studio adjacent to the Eagles, who frequently had to stop recording their Hotel California album because Sabbath was just too fucking loud next door, so I shouldn't say nothing good. On September 25th, 1976, Black Sabbath released their penultimate record, Technical Ecstasy, and the results were mixed, as was the album's reception. It still kind of is. There are some great tracks on Technical Ecstasy like Backstreet Kids, You Won't Change Me, Dirty Women, and Gypsy, which you really shouldn't say because we know now that it's kind of an epithet, and that's doubly disappointing because if there is an anachronistic and historically shameful epithet to come off the album, it should really be Rock and Roll Doctor. Ow, 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 ow. Technical Ecstasy does okay. It goes to 13 on the UK charts and 51 on Billboard, but it doesn't even go gold until 1997, which is the same year that the next album goes platinum, when I guess we were all just desperate to listen to anything other than Semi-Charmed Life. 2 years later, in January of 1978, Black Sabbath's original lineup gives it one more go, heading back into the studio, this time in Toronto. Iommi was still insisting the band should sound like Foreigner, as he did on Technical Ecstasy, and Ozzy hated almost every song the band wrote, but he especially hated Breakout. I fucking love Breakout, but I also love Ozzy's quote about Breakout. He said, "The bottom line was that Breakout was stretching it too far for me. With tracks like that on the album, we might as well have been called Slack Haddock, not Black Sabbath. The only impressive thing about a jazz band, as far as I was concerned, was how much they could drink." God damn it, never change, Ozzy. So he left the band and was replaced with former Fleetwood Mac vocalist Dave Walker. There's a kind of cool compare-contrast to be done with Dave Walker and Ozzy Osbourne because you can find some of the tracks Walker recorded with the band. This is one of my favorites off of the album, which would eventually be called Junior's Eyes. But here is Dave Walker's version.
for some copy, he said. But I hear drunk on water, said he'd be seen dead for much less.
And it's great. Dave Walker sounds awesome, and he lets the chorus just be instrumental, which is kind of fucking cool. I'm sure Iommi appreciated it. But then Ozzy came back. His father was dying at the time, which is part of the reason why he was swirling around the drain and ended up checking himself into a mental hospital around that time. But when he returned to the band, he asked Geezer to write new lyrics for the song. So Geezer did. And in a bit of inexplicable genius, Geezer wrote lyrics not just for Ozzy, but about Ozzy and his father, Jack. Here it is, Junior's Eyes.
Julian's eyes looked up to the skies in tears. He prayed that his maker, the giver and taker, would hear. Julian sighed as his hands reached out to the sky. Julian cried the day that his best friend died. You're coming home again tomorrow. I'm sorry it won't be for long. With all the pain of what you live within, I'll try my hardest not to cry when it is time to say goodbye.
That one always gets me. It's an incredible song. The final Black Sabbath album of the original lineup was ironically titled Never Say Die. Now, I don't think there is an original Sabbath that gets more hatred and is less deserving of it than Never Say Die. Here's the opener, the title track, Never Say Die.
People going nowhere, taking for a ride, looking for the answers that they know inside, searching for a reason, looking for a rhyme. No white medicine, partners in crime. Don't they ever have to worry? Don't you ever wonder why? It's the part of me that kills you. Don't you ever, don't ever say die. Never, never, never say die.
Now come on, that's good shit. It's different. But Sabbath Bloody Sabbath is different too. Tech Ek and Never Say Die always sounded like Black Sabbath's AM radio albums to me. Not everybody's gonna dig it, and I will admit to not liking the majority of Tech Ek, but Never Say Die for me is a great fucking album. Evidence A, this.
Well, you know that Johnny's a spider, and his web is the city at night.
That's Johnny Blade. Yeah, the lyrics are pretty 80 cheese dick, but my Omi, that riff. That's the best song. New album, you think Johnny Blade is the best song on Never Say Die? No, any album. You think Johnny Blade is the best song on any Sabbath album? No, any album. You think Johnny Blade is the best song on any album? You know, to make it better. Wait, just a second, new album. No, just to clarify here. You think Black Sabbath wrote the greatest song in the history of the world, the Western world, and you think that song is Johnny Blade off of Never Say Die, and now you're gonna tell him how to fix it? Always room for improvement. Okay, that is true. There is always room for improvement, but so how do they fix it? Motorcycle. Okay, I kind of walked into that one. Honestly, I'm just glad you didn't say demon with tits. Demon with tits, yep, okay. I'm going to the pub. See you later. Yeah, see you later. And here's my sleeper fave off the B-side, a song called Shockwave. When you close your eyes and you think of Black Sabbath, this album probably isn't what you hear, but that doesn't mean that what you hear is bad. You're thinking of Born Again. Born Again is bad. Never Say Die went to number 12 in the UK and peaked on the US Billboard charts at 69. But one of the reasons I think the album gets so much shit is because the guy throwing most of said shit was the lead vocalist. In 1981, Ozzy said, "The last album I did with Sabbath was Never Say Die, and it was the worst piece of work that I've ever had anything to do with. I'm ashamed of that album. I think it's disgusting." Okay, Ozzy, I know you're mad, but I want to tell you something, and I say this as someone who has loved you his entire life. Go fuck yourself. Never Say Die is a great album. If you're really that ashamed of that record, go listen to Down to Earth, Black Rain, Scream, Ordinary Man, or Patient Number 9. Trust me, you'll feel better about Never Say Die. In 1979, 10 years after Black Sabbath was formed, Ozzy was fired from the group and was never heard from again. Oh, wait, no, I just looked at my notes here. Apparently he made some solo records that did okay. Well, good for him. Hope he can make something of himself one day. Black Sabbath was determined to carry on into the 80s and 90s and beyond, with a rotation of band members surrounding the one guy who has come to symbolize Black Sabbath for their millions of fans, Tony Iommi. When I decided to do a Black Sabbath deep dive, I really wanted to include the tenure of Ronnie James Dio, who took over frontman duties for Ozzy and put together what many consider to be albums that are among their best: Heaven and Hell, Mob Rules, The Devil You Know under the name Heaven and Hell as a band, and my personal favorite, Dehumanizer. But the original lineup of Ozzy Osbourne, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward never recorded another album together again. And I doubt they ever will. But in a way, Black Sabbath has never stopped giving us new music. The legacy left by those 4 kids from backstreet Birmingham is, for my money, unlike anything else in popular music. Most people will see a podcast episode devoted exclusively to Black Sabbath and think it's a niche topic at best. Black Sabbath isn't the Beatles. They're not the Rolling Stones. They're not even Led Zeppelin. But when you pull back and take a look at this band, the kind of music that they make, and the influence they still have in their dimly lit corner of rock and roll, Black Sabbath is in a category entirely their own. I said it in an earlier pod, and I say it frequently in casual conversation where no one is talking about Black Sabbath, music, or to me for that matter. There is no album in music history like the debut record by Black Sabbath. Now, I say that not to exclude the other 5 albums that occupy that section of their discography we label untouchable, but because the seeds of those albums, Paranoid through Sabotage, are also contained in that eponymous LP. I'm not saying that the Black Sabbath debut is the most influential record in history, obviously, but I am saying that I think the influence of Black Sabbath's debut on heavy metal is greater than the influence of any other album on any other musical genre. But I'd be interested to hear if you think there are any challengers. To me, only perhaps Sgt. Pepper comes close to being as influential on the music and the musicians that emerged in its wake. The Beatles' psychedelic concept album changed popular music forever. It has sold over 32 million copies and is an undeniable monolith of influence for modern music. There are no doubt bands that seek to emulate what the Beatles accomplished with that record, like Oasis, a band consisting of 2 brothers, but exactly 1 eyebrow. But heavy metal has given birth to entire subgenres dedicated exclusively not just to channeling the energy, mood, and sound of the early Sabbath records, but with some even trying to replicate it exactly. Sabbath worship, as it were, started with Witchfinder General and Pagan Altar in the early 80s, but you can hear even deeper levels of fanaticism on releases from this century. Sleep's much-anticipated 2/3 reunion album from 2018, The Sciences, lists as a song title, Giza Butler. Giza, like the pyramids, Butler, like the geezer. And here's a release from 2022 by a proto-metal doom outfit called Warco off the album The Giant's Dream, with song titles like Omega Sunrise, Winter Knot, and the album closer, Church of Void, where my family and I attend regularly. A church which one presumably goes into so as to worship the void. And just to drive my point home here, like it got plastered at an office party and started hitting on our boss, but I can't let her get fired because she's the only one who lets me use the copier to print off stuff for the podcast. Here's Uncle Acid and the Deadbeats with Lonely and Strange. So why would a podcast about Black Sabbath be considered niche, whereas a podcast about a band that has sold a comparable number of albums, say the Rolling Stones, be considered of more popular interest? I was honestly surprised when I looked at the numbers, but the Stones are ahead of Sabbath, and just Sabbath, by maybe 10 million records. That's not including Ozzy. It's about 85 million to Sab's 75 million, and the Stones' best-selling record, Some Girls in 1978, has sold about half of Paranoid's 12 million. So why is it that if I meet somebody off the street who likes the Stones, I think, okay, Stones fan, makes sense. But if I see somebody wearing a Black Sabbath t-shirt, I suddenly feel less alone in the world. As I really started to dig down into that answer for myself, I realized there's a significant difference in those two fan bases. One, the Stones are just a more ubiquitous cultural presence. Their name is synonymous with rock and roll, whereas Sabbath is more of a curiosity in the broader culture, so there is an issue of probability. I'm a lot less likely to meet another Sabbath fan than a Rolling Stones fan on the street. Or so I thought before I looked at the numbers. I started to think maybe the difference was less quantitative and more qualitative, that there is something fundamentally different about being a Sabbath fan than there is of being a Stones fan. And therein, I think, lies the rub. To put a finer point on it, I think it's much easier to be a casual fan of the Beatles or the Stones or even Led Zeppelin than it is to be a casual fan of Black Sabbath. The other day, my pal Lance Doomy McDoombutt Tibbs did a run of listening to Sabbath's entire discography on Twitter, and God help him, he actually likes the 80s detritus that comes between Dio records. I realized that I've never seen anyone do that for the Stones, and why would they? Look, admittedly, I am not a Stones fan, but once you make it through the 70s, how much is there that you haven't already heard? They aren't exactly a progressive band, and a Stones record is kind of a Stones record is a Stones record. But they do make albums that you could put on in the background or play at a party without too much complaint from your dinner guests. Sabbath? Not so much. There aren't a lot of people who want to converse casually between caramelized Brussels sprouts beneath the sound of war pigs. Sabbath isn't a casual band. They demand something more than that. Even the records that come out of their more radio-friendly attempts like Tech Ek or Never Say Die. You might put Black Sabbath on in the background, but they won't stay there. You either have to turn it off or sit the fuck down and listen. So when I meet another Sabbath fan, I feel like I'm meeting someone who's earned their fandom in the same way that I have. They don't just like the sound and put their favorite songs on a playlist. They make top 10 lists to categorize their favorite albums and another to categorize their favorite songs. And then they do it all again, but with the albums and songs that they think are the objective best and not their favorites, because one is objective and the other is subjective. And yes, I am definitely talking about myself now. They do public listening experiences on Twitter. They sit down with a pint or two or a joint or two and listen to the debut through Volume 4 in an evening and start on Sabbath Bloody Sabbath on the next morning and get through as much of Born Again as they can before skipping to Dehumanizer, The Devil You Know, and 13. Some sick fucks don't even skip. Masochists. I'll say it again. Sabbath is not a casual band. They aren't the Eagles. They aren't a greatest hits band. You don't put Sabbath on shuffle. Almost all Sabbath devotees listen to albums the way they were intended to be heard, and even the songs you struggle through or skip become part of the experience, a challenge, the hairy mole on the face of your beloved life partner. All Black Sabbath albums are our children, and some just disappoint us more than others. And Tony Martin is your cousin's shitty kid that you have to see a couple times a year, but Iommi's always happy when he visits, and it makes you happy to see Iommi happy. Anyway, the point of all this is that for the rest of the world, Black Sabbath is an anachronism with a cult following. But to Sabbath fans, or rather Sabbath fanatics, the devotees and disciples of Sabbath who worship at the altar of Iommi, following the smoke to the riff-filled land, Black Sabbath is both the embodiment and the symbol of all that music can and ought to be. An experience that is mystical and visceral, transcendent and transformative. It demands your attention, and you willingly give over that attention on a semi-regular basis. One day my wife asked me why the shared calendar in our phones notified her on November 30th that December 1st was the day Sabbath Bloody Sabbath was released. And I told her because otherwise you might forget. I listen to every Ozzy and Dio Sabbath album on the day they were released every year because Black Sabbath is not a casual band and I am not a casual fan. And I suspect many, if not most, of you aren't either. One final point, and then I want to stop talking for a year. As you may know, I studied theater in college and in grad school. No, please, don't applaud. That means I've had a lot of art history education. There are artists that we are all supposed to consider important, right? Da Vinci, Shakespeare, Emily Dickinson, for example. And if you think Emily Dickinson doesn't belong in that list, especially if you are a metal fan, you need to pause whatever shit album you're listening to and go read some Emily Dickinson. This chick never left her room. She dressed in black every day and wrote some of the doomiest lyrics you'll ever read, like, "I felt a funeral in my brain" in 1861, wherein Miss Dickinson wrote, "And then I heard them lift a box and creak across my soul. With those same boots of lead again, then space began to toll." Emily Dickinson is metal as fuck. She threw in an Iron Man reference, okay? Case closed. But there's a reason why we've chosen those artists to represent their particular eras. Our first impulse when encountering these names is to quickly latch on to the one or two factoids about them so that we can regurgitate them during class discussion.
Leonardo da Vinci invented sfumato technique and allowed tones and colors to shade gradually into one another, producing softened outlines or hazy forms.
Cool. B+. Have you ever seen the Mona Lisa? You ever looked at it in the Louvre? It's not the optimal viewing experience because it's kind of small and you have to move in a weird herd because there are so many people trying to catch a glimpse of it. But the factoid of sfumato has nothing to do with the reason that the Mona Lisa is the most famous image in the Western world. There's some weird, dark shit going on in that picture, and we've been trying to figure out what it is since 1503. People think Shakespeare is famous because he wrote all those quote-a-day calendars and found flowery ways to describe eyes. He did, and that's great, but go listen to Macbeth. Don't read it. No one was ever supposed to read it. It was meant to be heard. Go listen to King Lear, Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet. Yeah, the one that's supposed to be a love story. Here's Juliet's speech before she drinks a sleeping potion, imagining what it will be like when she wakes up in the family crypt. "Oh, if I wake, shall I not be distraught, environed with all these hideous fears, and madly play with my forefather's joints, and pluck the mangled Tybalt from his shroud, and in this rage, with some great kinsman's bones, as with a club, dash out my desperate brains." She says, what if I wake up surrounded by my dead family members and go crazy and start playing with their bodies, and then take a bone from my cousin's corpse and beat myself to death with it? But she does have pretty eyes. Da Vinci, Shakespeare, and Dickinson, also the name of my law firm, haven't endured for superficial reasons. They've endured because of their bottomless depths. We can keep coming back to them and find something deeper, something with more meaning, something heavier. It might thrill us one time and fucking terrify us the next, and that's why we keep coming back. We can listen to them every year on the day they were released and find something we never heard before. I do that with Black Sabbath. I can't do that with Jumpin' Jack Flash. With all of these artists, there is a before and an after moment. There was painting before Da Vinci and then after. There was theater and poetry before Shakespeare and Dickinson and then after. And the difference between the before and after are stark. That's art history and that's Black Sabbath. And in my stupid guy on a podcast opinion, there is no other band in music history in their respective genre more distinct or more important than Black Sabbath and the indelible imprint they left on the greatest music in the history of the world, heavy metal. On the next, and Volume for All, I am going to cover a band that I barely got to cover and really only as an appendage to Metallica. but they are one of the most important bands in the development of heavy metal. I wanted to talk about them during Thrash, but I just didn't have the time. So I get to go back to myself in those episodes. Hello, me, it's me again. On the next, and volume for all.